Okay, welcome to your very first lecture in Art History Survey. Today we're going to talk about prehistoric art. Here are some of the goals that we are going to try to achieve in this lecture. Going to look at the differences between human and animal figures, different techniques, and then different evolutions going from the Paleolithic period on up through the Mesolithic and the Neolithic periods. And then we'll see some of the later developments, not just cave art, but also megalithic stone structures. So this is one of the oldest pieces that is considered by some to be art, and I would debate it because it looks like it could just be a natural formation, and someone discovered this. It's not very big. It's only about yay big. It could just be an interesting rock, but it's got a few little markings on it that look a little bit more purposeful. So your book suggests that this could be a face or something like that. Maybe. Maybe not. I don't think there's that much evidence here to suggest that this could actually be a purposefully human-made piece of art, but who knows? It's prehistory, so there's no written records. We don't know. A lot of what I'm going to tell you is open for conjecture because it's not definitive. So humankind most likely began around here in Africa and then slowly migrated north. A lot of the more interesting pieces I'm going to show you come from around here, ancient France and ancient northern Spain, although we'll look at a few from the southern region of Turkey, and then we'll also go down here to Jericho, which is the same as the biblical city of Jericho that you remember from your Sunday school lessons. So as man sort of develops on the face of the planet, he begins as a group of migratory hunters and gatherers. Why are they migratory? Because the weather changes and they've got to follow the food. And the food here is mostly deer and antelopes and that sort of thing, but also the occasional woolly mammoth and rhinoceros. Woolly rhinoceros, believe it or not. Still blows my mind to think about rhinoceroses farting around in Paris, modern day Paris. But they did. Lions too. Animals take a pretty high priority in the artwork that's produced because that's where they get their food from. If they're not gathering berries, then they're hunting animals to get food, and then they skin them and get clothing and shelter, as we'll see later on as well. So that's where we are. And as a result of them being migratory, the vast majority of the things that we see are portable so that they can be carried with, so they're small. A few cases you'll find where they stay for a while deep within caves. We're still in the Ice Age when a lot of these pieces are produced, so they're seeking shelter, and we go back deep into the caves. That's where we get the most permanent shelter. Caves are convenient. You don't have to build them, you just have to find them. So here's a basic kind of breakdown of the different periods. Some of the oldest stuff, Paleo meaning old, Lithic meaning stone, 40,000 to about 10,000 BC or BCE, before Common Era. BC and AD are kind of old-fashioned delineators of time passage. They switched over to Common Era and before a Common Era about 30 years ago. And I still haven't made the switch, so I'll say BC and AD because I'm old and set in my ways. A lot of the art that we see it's interesting to think of it as fully formed images. If you think about how you learn to draw as a human, we bless you. we all start off kind of like this. And then, when you're 2 or 3 or 4, you start making things that make a little bit more sense. And then by the time you're 8, 9, 10 years old, you're in this era. Well, we don't find any of this type of art. All of the art that we discover from prehistory is fully formed, fully developed. There's no transition, no intermediary stage. So that's pretty interesting. Don't know why that is. Here is another piece. This was, it's 2002. I remember when I first made this slide in 2002. It was a pretty big deal because it was 75,000 years old, according to carbon dating, and so it was the oldest piece of art that had ever been discovered on the planet. And now that slide is 23 years old. So, geez Louise. Is it art? Maybe. It could be debated one way or the other. It was found in a cave along with some other things, some arrowheads and some bone splinters and so forth. What we're looking at is this guy right here because it has some purposeful markings on it. Now, there's an artist's conception I came up with about what that might have looked like back in the day. And again, 23 years ago, this was hilarious because everyone knew who the Flintstones were, but no more. So, what makes it art? There has to be intent. Something has to be intentionally made in order for it to be considered art in our modern terms. It's a very loose term. Art, as we think of it today, really didn't exist back then. In fact, it didn't really exist for thousands of years. Everything had a function. It had a purpose. It had a utilitarian reason for existing. But nowadays, that's not how we really think of art. It doesn't have a function. So, these lines that you see scratched into this stone are purposeful. We don't know what they are. They could be phases of the moon. I remember someone counted them once, and there's 28 of them, which is the menstrual cycle of a female. So that was an important thing to keep track of. You want to know when females are fertile, so you can make more little cave babies. And so that would be something you would want to keep track of. But what is it? Why was it done? We have no idea. These are all just guesses. But we do know that it's purposeful. This is the result of someone making a decision to make a mark and then inscribing it on this stone. A little bit more recently, from 23,000 years ago, we find this image of some sort of animal, probably some kind of cat, either a lion or something along those lines. Not really sure, it's indeterminate, but we do see some observation. We see a view of the animal from profile, and so you get 4 legs and the fact that it's a male animal, and then we get the head shape and that sort of thing. Why? Why would this be done? Not sure. It's small, it's portable, it's something you can take with you. Why would you take it with you? What does it mean? Most of the things that we see, the general consensus is that it was some sort of totem or a fetish to kind of ensure good hunts, or to ensure that animals reproduced, or to ensure that female Homo sapiens reproduced. And so the imagery tends to be about reinforcing that reproduction, nice fat animals that have lots of other little baby animals, or lots of meat on them for the winter that comes up, that sort of thing. How would they be used? What would their function be? Hard to say. Probably some sort of shaman rite or performance in order to ensure a good hunt or a good season, a good reproductive happening, that sort of thing, which implies higher thinking, that there is something beyond themselves, some sort of magical ether that has control of destiny and good fortune and that kind of thing. So that's an interesting way to look at it as well. Not something we normally think of with cavemen. We just think of them as savages. Here's another early piece carved from mammoth ivory. Again, that kind of thing just blows my mind. You think of woolly mammoths walking around, and they decide to kill one and use its tusks to make art. This is a little animal human hybrid. It's about a foot tall, little less than a foot tall. Body of a human, head of a lion. Could represent some sort of spiritual being or a deity of some kind, or it could be a shaman or a high priest who's wearing a mask and getting ready to perform some sort of rite. We don't know, but we do know that it's small and it's portable, so it's something they would have been able to pick up and take with them. There are traces of paint on it, as is the case with most of these things. They were painted in antiquity. A lot of it doesn't survive. Same is the case even with the ancient Egyptians, ancient Greeks and Romans. All their statuary was painted so it would look more lifelike, and that was we assume that to be the reason here as well. We want it to look as realistic and alive as possible, so we paint it up. Now we'll look at a few more little pieces. We talked about that. All right, sculpture in the round versus relief sculpture. This would be an example of sculpture in the round, i.e. it is carved in 360 degrees. It's meant to be seen from all sides, and it is separated from the substrate from which it was carved. And I'll show you some relief carvings in just a moment, and you'll be able to easily see the difference. So this is one of the earliest examples of a human representation, sculpture in the round. It's female figure. Why? Why was it done? Why was it made? Who made it? Well, we don't know. There are a couple of theories. Theory one is that this is a fertility idol or fertility fetish of some sort. Why fertility? Because we have a few things emphasized on her body. Her breasts are enlarged because we want her to be able to sustain any children she might have. There's an emphasis on her vaginal area because we want her to bear children. She's either wearing a little hat or she's got an elaborate hairdo. We don't know the difference. She's not fat, but she probably is pregnant. Why do you say she's not fat? Well, look at her arms. Her arms would be fat, just like her legs and so forth, if that were the case. And she has them resting on top of her breasts. All of these things together suggest some sort of emphasis on fertility. The alternate theory is that this is an ancient type of caveman porn. They carry these with them, and gets lonely out on the fields. You want to feel like you're not alone, and so you take your totem with you. She also was painted originally, sort of a yellowish color. I think her hair was more reddish, but the emphasis is on her genitals and her reproductive abilities and so forth. Most of the time when we see women portrayed, that's how they are portrayed, as vehicles for bearing children. When men are portrayed, they are usually hunting or killing animals in some way. So there's some early sort of societal roles for males and females in society established in a lot of this early art. This is a relief sculpture, i.e. it is still attached to the rock or the substrate from which it was carved. And again, we are emphasizing fertility. She's pregnant, and she's sort of rubbing her pregnant belly, as pregnant ladies will do. It's just a natural thing to sort of pat your baby living inside you. You can make out breasts, you can make out the vaginal area. This is all about reproduction and sustaining of the species. She's holding a bison horn, which is kind of interesting. That was interpreted for a while as kind of a cornucopia or horn of plenty, but those didn't really come around until about 3,000 years ago, so we are a little early for that. But maybe somehow the horn, which is probably a bison horn, represents sustaining of the species. Bison were pretty plentiful, and they provide meat, and they provide leather for shelter and for clothing and so forth. So all of that may have been intertwined in this image. It's very sensitively done, the result of observation. That one little detail of her having her hand on her abdomen there is something that you would have had to have observed and taken note of, because it's a very natural pose. There it is from another point of view. There's our cornucopia, very similar in shape to the bison horn, but again, probably a little too early for it to be a horn of plenty. And there are lots of these types of images that have been recovered. Here's another example. This one is incised into the background. It's one of the three types of relief sculptures. There's high relief, which projects out very far from the background. There's low relief, which doesn't project out as far. And then there's incised relief, which is actually carved into the background. Here's another little totem, a fertility idol that's been recovered. They're different artists. They have different skill levels, different levels of naturalism, different abilities. But we do see some similarities, the same sort of cap or hairstyle, and then the emphasis on breasts and vagina and buttocks and so forth. All of that probably having to do with fertility and trying to ensure reproduction and having lots of little mini cavemen running around so you can keep having food. Here's another one. This one carved into the substrate. The shape of the rock here may have suggested the shape that's carved on it. We see that occur oftentimes. Whatever the material is, it will suggest what it should be. Is it kind of shaped like a deer? Hey, this reminds me of a deer. I'll go ahead and carve it into a deer. Or it looks like a horse's head or something like that. So the shape of the material sometimes suggests what should be made in, what it should be made into. I'll look at a few other materials here. Here are a few bison reliefs. These are very interesting. They're about 15 to 10,000 years BCE. Carved from clay, which has been set onto natural rock outcroppings. The cracks that you see were probably contemporary to the making of this. These are two large bison seen in profile, and you know from ceramics that if you don't get all the air bubbles out of your clay, then you run the risk of it cracking as it dries, and that's probably what happened here. So it's deep in a cave. That's where these people are living and existing. The cave protects them and sustains them, protects them from the ice and cold. And I almost said dinosaurs, angry dinosaurs outside, but the time period is a little different. But there are saber-toothed tigers outside and other scary beasties. So this is a safe place. Why are they making this? Again, probably to ensure the sustaining of the species and that sort of thing. Another option could be boredom. Maybe they had nothing better to do, and so they just had a guy who had some talent and a little free time and some mud, and this is what we get. We don't know. It's prehistoric. It could be anything. This is a precious little object. It's very tiny, about 4 inches long, made from reindeer horn. It's a spear thrower. It's got a little divot in it, and you put your spear in it, and it helps you throw the spear further. But the shape of the horn reminded the carver of an actual bison or an actual animal that's sort of bending its head back on itself and trying to lick insects from its body, which is actual behavior of bison. Bison really do. There's his little tongue licking back and forth, trying to find whatever those are, flies, I don't know. And then a few years ago, I found this. Isn't that awesome? That is exactly what's happening here. So this guy saw this and thought, that kind of reminds me of this piece of reindeer horn I found. I'm just going to go ahead and carve that. And look at the detail. Every hair, all the fur, the little tongue looking out, the shape of the eye. Lots of development, not what you think of when you think of primitive cavemen. It's actually quite developed, quite sophisticated. And again, the result of observation. They would have seen these things, and then that would have inspired them to make the object. We see the same sort of thing painted onto the walls of caves. More bison. This one's wounded. It's been hit by spears and is bleeding out. Different colors. They would use whatever was local, so red ochre, soot from campfires to get the blacks, yellow ochre. How would they put the pigment on the walls? It could have been blown on through a reed or a hollow bone or something, or brushed on with a brush made out of frayed reeds, and then the pigment suspended in melted animal fat or plant fat, and then applied to the walls with a brush. Two different techniques. But there's lots of these. The style is very similar, even when they're separated by great distances. It's kind of uncanny how these things all develop independently of one another, and yet they're still very similar. Another little piece made from mammoth ivory, still very elegant and very graceful. Not at all what we think of when we think of cavemen and their sort of brutal lifestyles. This one has a nice level of finish. But we still ask, well, where's the early stuff? Where's the stuff that they were still learning how to do? Where are those formative intermediary works that kind of show us how they developed? They're not around. They don't exist. This is it. Fully formed, fully finished pieces that make their way down to us. This one is from Lascaux and has that same level of refinement and finish to it. Very calligraphic in the way that it's painted, almost reminiscent of some 15th century Chinese scroll painting. Hence the name, the Chinese horse. It has a kind of elegance to it and grace that we find in some of those Chinese scroll paintings. In addition to the drawing here, there are lots of little other marks. This little geometric shape, these little shapes, we don't know what they mean. These are arrows, so they weren't above eating the horses. We don't know if they're riding horses around yet, but they're at least exposed to them. What do the geometric shapes mean? We don't know. Could be the marking of the passage of time. I read a theory about tribal boundary markings. This is owned by this tribe. This is owned by that tribe. That sort of thing. You're in our territory, so beware. Possibly. Again, it's prehistory. We don't know, so anything goes. This is kind of a fun one. This is the same drawing, but we've zoomed out a little bit so that you can see the accompanying horse. So there's this horse, and then there's this horse, and they're separated by this line, which is actually the tail of a big cow here that comes down and makes a whole sort of little mural. Again, maybe the line represents a boundary or a perimeter. Don't go past this line. If you're from the tribe of the black horse, don't come over here to the tribe of the red horse, or arrows. So there's my reminder about the fact that there are no intermediary, developmental, or childlike images. Here is another view of the image from Spain of the wounded bison. It's in what's called a twisted profile, where we see multiple angles of the object at the same time. So we can see the front of it and the side of it all at once, which indicates an understanding and observation of the subject in front of them. And then they go and reproduce it inside of a cave. Why is it inside of the cave? Probably, again, some sort of ritualistic meaning done to ensure a good hunt, or something like this. Is what we want to happen. We want wounded bison. We want them to be killed so that we can eat them and take their skins and that sort of thing. The age of these is kind of interesting. All within this one picture here, we have a separation of images that are about 20,000 years apart. But they don't look it. They look like they were all done around the same time, but they overlap one another over thousands of years, and we see this time and time again, multiple layers of things done in the same spot. What does that suggest? It suggests that the space itself may be sacred, that people come to this particular space to perform this particular ceremony over and over and over for thousands of years. And so it's very important. Again, just very, very interesting. Also interesting, the variety of animals that we see in these areas. This one is a spotted horse that was drawn on an outcropping of rock. This little bit sort of looks like a horse's head. So once again, the substrate, the material that it is made from, kind of suggests what it ought to be. So that's kind of interesting. It's 3D and 2D all at the same time. And then this creepy handprint here. All of these handprints and footprints of cave people just creep me the hell out. Because I don't want to think about things leaving handprints from 12, 15,000 years ago. That's just, it bothers me for some reason. So there, now it can bother you. There's another big handprint. Why? Why leave a handprint? A number of theories. It could be another boundary marker. This is you are in the territory of the tribe of the Black Hand or something like that. Or it could just be wanting to make one's mark. Artists, and you're all artists, one level of another. So we have this innate need to make marks and be remembered, and this may be something along those lines. People have an innate need to leave their mark on things. Here's another one. Cave of the Hands. Layers and layers of hands done over hundreds, in some cases thousands of years, hands layered on top of one another. This could be many, many, many generations of the same family going to the same place to kind of leave their mark. Hard to say, but extremely creepy nonetheless. Not a new idea. We still do that today. This is Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, where all the big stars used to leave their footprints and handprints, sign their names. People have this need to leave their mark, and they still do it today. Lots of markmen. I don't know why we need to do that, but I did it. Gosh, how many times have you written your name on a desk? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Here are a couple of different pigments, and you can see The color palette's kind of limited. It's all natural pigments, usually within this realm of red and black and some orangish yellow browny colors. That's about it. That's about the range of all of these different pigments. The best example of cave art comes to us from Lascaux, France. On the 12th of September in 1940, the entrance to the cave at Lascaux was discovered by an 18-year-old kid named Marcel Ravidat when his dog Robot fell in a hole. And then when he lowered himself down into the hole to get his dog back, he lit a lantern and he saw these fantastic cave paintings that had not been exposed to air before, so they're very pristine. And I knew you would be curious, so I found a picture of Robot. There he is. He was a good boy. Oh, he looks all right. He did okay. They got him out. But once they went down and found these fantastic cave paintings and cave drawings, it put Lascaux on the map. They started giving tours, and hundreds of thousands of people a year would go in to these caves and look at all of these drawings. This photo gives you sort of an idea of what it would have been like at first. Still very dark, very claustrophobic. I don't know if you've ever been in a cave, but whenever you go in and they turn the lights out to show you how dark it really is, it is really super dark. You can't see anything. So it makes you wonder, how did they do this? Obviously they had to bring fire in, so they're painting and drawing all this by torchlight or something like that. So it could have been super creepy. Maybe the flickering of the flame made these drawings sort of look like they were moving, and that helped with the magical aspect of it and how they were able to do things. Here's some more. This is from the Hall of the Bulls. Again, layers and layers and layers of drawings over hundreds of years, people going to the same place, doing the same thing. The style is very similar to what we saw in Spain, same twisted perspective. You can see it here in this big bull. You see the profile of the head, but then the front of the horns at the same time. All of it telling us that the artist knew what the bull looked like, and were keen observers of that, and then the angle of the legs, the hooves, all curves of the horns. Those are all details that would have to be very closely observed in order to be reproduced. Lascaux is a pretty windy little cave complex. Parts of it are really difficult to get to, particularly this bit here, the shaft grave. And if you're claustrophobic, I'm sorry, but there's a part where you have to climb up on this little rock shelf and then crawl on your belly with about this much clearance for about 50 yards. And then you drop down into this little cistern, and then that's where these drawings are. This is a very special place, reserved for only a few. There's not very many drawings in it, but somebody did it. Why? What made them want to go in there? Why? It had to have been important, or they wouldn't have done it. Another view of that twisted perspective. And then here are our tourists. It was eventually closed to the public in 1963 because so many people coming into the cave and their breath, the moisture in their breath, began to grow mold on the ceilings, and the paint started to flake off. And so they closed it off and resealed it, and it arrested the mold growth. And now they just go in once a year. Some scientists go in once a year to check on it, see how it is, but you can't tour it anymore. But what they did do was right next to it, they built an exact replica. Go figure that out. They dug out and built a complete replica of the whole Lascaux cave system, and you can tour that. I don't know why you would, but it's there for you. You can also go to the Lascaux website if you want and take a virtual tour of the original cave and see it firsthand. That I would probably do before I would look at a fake cave. But there are the scientists going in and checking mold growth, making sure that everything is how it ought to be. This is from a nearby cave at Chauvet, which I found interesting because it shows a rhinoceros. And again, you don't think about woolly rhinoceroses running around France, but by cracky, there they are, right along with the woolly mammoths and the lions. There's some of the black mold before it got abated and taken out. You can see some of the paint that has flaked off of this particular bull. You can see the technique, though. They would incise into the wall surface, scratch it in, and then fill it in with paint. So it's sort of a combination of incised relief and painting, all kind of put together. There's some more animals from Chauvet. This one has lions on the left, and then a whole herd of rhinoceri on the right. Just mind-blowing. It would be like finding rhinoceroses around Kearney. I know they find woolly mammoths over on the western part of the state. There's a whole fossil bed full of mammoth bones and so forth, which is kind of mind-blowing to think about woolly mammoths walking around here. There's some more. This one has lions. Lots of lions. I'm not lying. Lots of lions roaming the plains. Here is the inside of Chauvet Cave, which is full of bear skulls. Bears probably lived in here, and then the people came in and found them and then killed them and used them for food. But this is also one of those sort of creepy things because there's this one bear skull that someone put on top of this rock thousands and thousands of years ago, and it's still there. And then right next to it is this one that has had mineral waters dripping on it over thousands of years, and now it's calcified and turned into stone, which is kind of crazy. Also fires, remnants of fires in there, tools, all sorts of things inside. Why? Why are they keeping these things? Are they trophies? Are they just cool things to have around? We don't know. It's prehistory. Who can say? There's a couple of more bear skulls that have been turned into stone. And then here are some footprints from Chauvet Cave. There's a little kid's footprints. About an 8 to 10-year-old kid left the footprint, and then right next to it, dog paws. So they were already kind of cohabitating caves with canines. They weren't really dogs, they were more like wolves. They weren't pets, they were probably hunting partners. It was a symbiotic relationship. They would go hunting together and share the kill and that sort of thing. But these footprints, damn, those are just scary, creepy stuff. And then here are some horses and mammoths from Chauvet Cave as well. Mind-blowing stuff. This is just for fun. Those are ancient French getting ready for a mammoth burger. This is an interesting creature that is no longer with us, the Megaloceros, which is a giant elk. I forget how tall it was, 27 feet tall at the shoulder, which is just gigantic. 30-foot deer, can you imagine? There it is. See the slope of the back, how it's kind of going up? This guy's running downhill, but he's keeping his head level, as deer do. If you ever watch deer jumping. They always keep their head level, no matter how. So they observed this happening, and then the way that they drew the antlers here, almost an exact reference to the fossil that's been discovered there. Then we've got other little marks. We don't know what that means. Maybe that's how many megaloceroses they killed, or maybe that's how many months go by until it's megaloceros season. I don't know. Could be just about anything, but still very interesting. Not unrelated to these other geometric marks that we saw back at Lascaux. Marking something, territory, passage of time, we don't know. The last little bit at Lascaux is this one from that shaft I was telling you about, the little cistern. It's a strange little narrative. We've got a rhinoceros, and then we have an angry bison. And we know he's angry because his hackles are up there on his back. And he has been hit with a spear, and his intestines are spilling out onto the ground. And then we have this guy. We don't know who he is. We don't know if he's dead. We don't know if he's astral projecting or what have you. Is it a shaman performing some sort of hunting rite? We don't know. And then we have this bird on a stick, and the head of the bird looks just like the head of the man. And if you compare levels of naturalism, the bison and the rhino are much more naturalistic and believable than our stick figure with an erection here as he's falling back in front of the bison. Oh, and then a broken spear. So you put all those things together and make a nice story about what happened, and maybe you're right. And then you've got to include also the 6 poops coming out from under the rhinoceros's tail there. Don't know what that means either, but it's interesting. And then there's a closer view across the planet. Here are some rock paintings from about 50 to 75,000 years ago, people hunting kangaroos. And you'll see that the kangaroos, just like the Chinese horse and the bull, they're all very fat. They're going to give you lots of meat. And the animals are rendered a lot more sensitively than the humans are because they're more important. We don't eat humans, so there's no really need to pay that much of attention to them. But we do eat kangaroos, and so we want them to be nice and juicy and fat. So, all right. Well, I'm about halfway done. So sometimes I like to give you a little break. So if you want to go vape for a couple of minutes or go use the bathroom, I've got a little about 4-minute video here of a really terrible music video from 1960 about the song Alley Oop. And of course it's not going to play, so we may not have it after all. No, I'm going to skip it because we'll watch it and I'll just sing. How's that? And so here's a song from the Hollywood Argyles. They're a funny group, and we're glad to see them here today. And hope you'll. That's Dick Clark, by the way. He used to host a show called American Bandstand back in the day. You know, it's really no big loss that you're missing out on this because it's pretty terrible. They lip sync all of the words, and it's really just horrible. They're singing a song about an old comic book caveman named Alley Oop. That's about all I got for you there. Sorry. It played last year. I don't know why it's not playing this year.
Is your sound on?
Yeah, it's on. So I don't know. I don't want to mess with it too much because I'm recording all this for posterity. Oh, God, I started it over. All right, let's just skip it. Boom. Now we'll go into the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age, and we'll get to see how the climate sort of affected things that were produced in Siberia, which is ancient Russia. These are from the Ukraine. We find houses made out of mammoth bones. Why? Why do they make houses out of mammoth bones? Because that's all there was. You work with what you've got. When you're on the tundra, there's not a lot of trees growing, and even if there are, it's a lot of work to cut down a tree with a stone axe, and so it's a lot more convenient to just go ahead and use what's available, and that happened to be mammoth skeletons that they would then arrange and then cover with mammoth skins to make little houses. Not unlike what the ancient Nebraskans did back in the 1800s when they made houses out of dirt, sod houses. So I guess when you get super cold, houses made out of dead animals and dirt don't seem so bad. But there they are, Custer County, Nebraska. And then, of course, who can forget the shelter afforded to one young Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back when he almost froze to death and Han Solo came to his rescue and slid open the tauntaun and shoved young Luke inside. So it's not a new idea, living in the corpses of big animals for a little while. So he makes this nice mammoth house, or he makes a city, and they make it out of bricks, and they build walls around it, hence the term fortified city. Because all of these cities were at war with one another. Everybody was trying to take away what everyone else had, because it's sure a lot easier to steal from someone than it is to make something yourself. And so the early cities tended to be walled cities, and all of the entrances were on the roofs. You would just travel from roof to roof and go in and out of the different cities. And we start having jobs develop for people that go beyond just hunter-gatherer. We start to have craftsmen develop, people who can make cloth, and people who can run markets, priests, and bricklayers, and furniture makers, and you name it. So society and cities that are more familiar to us today begin to evolve about 8,000 to 7,000 years ago. And Jericho is one of the first. Jericho was known for its walls. This is the same city that Joshua surrounded and walked around in the Old Testament, and then eventually blew some trumpets, and the walls of Jericho came a-tumbling down according to God's will. That's what it would have looked like back in the day. And you can see all of the walls, outer wall, secondary wall, and then all of the buildings in the center where people could reside in relative peace in case they were attacked. They had the walls to protect them. The walls were pretty big, 5 to 12 feet thick, and then in some cases 15, 17, 30 feet tall. We can see our local down there, and it gives you an idea of how high some of these walls were and how thick they were. In addition to fortified cities, the Jerichoans gave us some interesting burial rites, some of the earliest recorded burial rites. So when someone dies, what do? We're not sure what the migratory peoples did. Probably isolated them and maybe buried them in the ground to keep animals away, covered them with rocks or something. But the Jerichoans had a different idea, and so when someone in your family died, the MO was to take the head off and take the body and dump it down into a pit called a shaft grave, which was under your house. And then cover it with dirt to keep the smell down. And then you take the head and you boil it until all of the meat comes off, and then you rebuild the skin out of clay, and then paint that and put little shells in for the eyes, and you put it on a shelf in your house, kind of like your grandma has all those pictures of your relatives that you don't know in the hallway, and you well, now you have the actual relatives, and you can go and talk to them and ask their advice and get them to petition the gods on your behalf for a good harvest and that sort of thing. So this is an example of one of those. There's a whole bunch of these that have been recovered, ancient relatives. The heads were important. Those were seen as sort of a spirit container. So it wasn't just grandma's head, it was grandma. So you could go and pour your heart out to your relatives and ask for their guidance or protection or what have you. And they also did some larger figures. This one's from Jordan. Sometimes they had entire skeletons that they would take the meat from and then rebuild out of plaster. Usually that was for children who had passed away, and they kind of recreate their children out of plaster. This one is just plaster that's painted and then inlaid. There's not a skeleton inside. Sometimes there are, though. And again, you start to see the scale increasing. Now that we're not migrating and walking around everywhere, we can make bigger things that we don't have to carry around with us. What would be the function of this? It could have been a grave marker, or it could have been sort of an effigy of the deceased used for funerary purposes, and then buried, ritually buried, or maybe kept in the house. We're not sure. But we do see the emergence of larger scale sculpture. This is another town that was discovered in Turkey. It's a little older than Jericho, about 1,000 years older than Jericho, Çatalhöyük. But it has the same sort of layout. It's a fortified city, and then you enter into the ceilings of all of the houses, and the whole group of houses protected by a wall all the way around. And you can have different functions for different rooms. One of them is a temple, and then one of them is like a communal sort of meeting place, and then the smaller ones are dwellings. This is a reconstruction of a shrine room that was discovered at Çatalhöyük, and you can see images of bulls here. Here's the actual room. Effigies of bulls and cows. Just like at Lascaux, cows and bulls are symbols of fertility and continue to be symbols of fertility and royalty, even when we get into Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and so forth. The goddess Hathor, goddess of fertility, has the head of a bull. So that bull imagery remains even on into the Aegean cultures that we'll see later on. We see images of bulls. Some of the wall paintings that have survived are hunting scenes, dances, that sort of thing. There's a detail from some of those wall paintings where they're chasing different animals, boars, stags, and then there's also some dancing and celebrating going on, playing of musical instruments, all of that happening at the same time to celebrate the hunt. You can see they've used nets to capture some of these animals, and those have made it. Bless you. Those have made it into the paintings. This is a reconstruction of what the city would have looked like back in the day, just to give you kind of an idea. All constructed from brick, right next to a water source, which makes sense. Within the city, this piece was recovered. It's a fairly large stone structure, female image, probably some sort of deity. And again, just like with the woman of Willendorf, we have an emphasis on breasts, vaginal area. In fact, this particular goddess is giving birth. There's a little baby down here between her ankles. Why is it a deity? Because of the lions on the arms of her throne. Lions, symbols of royalty and power. Only a deity would command a throne with lions at the hands. And then there it is today, an alternate view. Still fairly large compared to what we've seen before. But again, the emphasis on body parts having to do with reproduction and fertility and that sort of thing, just like we saw with the woman of Willendorf. Even though they are separated by tens of thousands of years, the idea is the same. Here is another image of a hunt from Catalhuyuk, and you can see once again more attention to detail is paid to the animals than is paid to the humans. The humans consume and the animals provide, so we want to make sure that the animal images get more love than the person images. This is another kind of interesting one. It's sort of hard to make out, but it's a double-coned volcano right here, and all these little dots you see, that's erupting lava. So you can imagine being at the base, living at the base of this twin-coned volcano, and then ascribing deity characteristics to it. This is the city right next to it. And so the volcano sort of becomes alive and becomes a symbol of a god. If it's angry, then it erupts lava. But if everything's good, then it's dormant and there's nothing, no hot lava coming out of it or anything like that. All right. Last little bit we'll talk about are the megaliths. Mega, big, lith, rocks. These are big rocks, things made out of big rocks, and there are three basic types. And the first type is the menhir. Menhir is simply an oblong stone, a stone that is longer than it is tall, and it stands upright in the earth like you see here. Sometimes they are all by themselves, in which case we would call it a monolith, and then other times they're in groups and arranged in certain ways. Some of those arrangements have to do with the summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year. That's when we want to celebrate the sun, which gives life to the plants that we're trying to grow and eat from. So one of the theories behind these menhirs is that they are sort of symbolic phalluses that fertilize the earth. They symbolically fertilize the earth, and perhaps each one represents a season that passes by, and they want to continue ensuring that the earth gets fertilized and keeps providing food for those who live nearby. The most famous ones are here in Carnac, which is in France, but they are scattered all over the place. These are some more. There's another legend surrounding these that has to do with an invading army of pirates that were then turned into stone by an angry goddess. So those could be stone pirates, for all I know. But probably not. There's a view from above. That whole complex at Karnak is about 13,000 feet long, and that gives you a better idea of how very many stones are arranged there. Very purposeful, obviously very important, because that's a lot of trouble to go to move a 10 or 12 ton stone and erect it in the landscape. There's a monolith, single stone, all alone. Probably the same sort of function. This one's in Ireland, but it's the same sort of idea, fertilizing the earth, that kind of thing. It may have also been a marker of some kind. The Vikings later on will use similar stones to marked territories, marked sites of big battles and that type of thing. So who knows? This is the second type of megalithic stone structure called a dolmen, from the Celtic word for table. Dolmen, table, rock is how that translates. And they're not tables, they're houses for the dead, basically. Sometimes they will exist as you see them, and then sometimes they are buried in the ground, covered with rubble, and then sometimes they're buried in the ground covered with rubble, but there's a long tunnel passage so that you can go in and visit the dead and leave offerings and that sort of thing. But basically that's their function. They are giant grave sites, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. This is another dolmen. This one also from Karnak, where we saw the menhirs. Compare. And then Fred Flintstone's house. Coincidence? I think not. This one's in France. This is the interior of one of those tunnel passages or a tunnel grave that is sometimes attached to a dolmen. And again, sometimes they're buried and sometimes they're not. Here's one more. This one's in Ireland. Some of the other rocks have gone missing. And then that one also in Ireland. That gives you an idea of how it would have looked when it's covered with cairn, which are all these smaller stones. So you can have your house of the dead, bury the whole thing, or leave a tunnel and create a passage grave so that you can go then and visit the deceased. And then there's a view down through a passage grave, very claustrophobic. Technique of stacking rocks here gradually, successively inward is called corbelling, and it's another stone building technique that will be used in Mesopotamia and eventually Egypt later on as well. And then the third type of stone structure, megalithic stone structure, is called a cromlech, which simply means a circle of stones. There's no dead bodies here. Well, there are some, but they're not grave markers, but they are religious in nature, some sort of spiritual function, some sort of sacred ritual site. In some cases, human sacrifice is involved. And again, the whole idea is to keep the earth fertile and keep the harvests coming. And so you do what you need to do. You offer sacrifices to the deities to ensure that the harvests keep on a-coming. Here's another view, different cromlech. This one's in Bulgaria. I like to show you more than one example so that you know it's not a one-off, that someone just happened to make this circle of stones. Sometimes the rocks line up to constellations in the sky, and sometimes they line up to the summer or winter solstice, which tells us they most likely had some sort of ritual function. These are in Portugal. And then, of course, the most famous cromlech of them all, Stonehenge in Salisbury, Maryland. When you go visit, they're going to charge you about $50 to stand here. But if you stand here, it's free. So when you want to take your picture at Stonehenge, take your selfie, just do it from the road. It's not going to make that much difference if you're 20 feet closer and you pay that fee. So you're welcome in advance for saving you a few bucks. Probably, well, it was a ritual site. There's different phases of Stonehenge that have come and gone over the years. You can see the outline of some of these other little rings that go around it. Some of the rings have little pits full of cremated human remains in them. And then in the center here, this is where the sacrifice would take place and these stones are all aligned to the rising of the sun on the summer solstice. So that's where the rituals would take place. There you are. That's your free picture right there. But if you want to pay $50, you can go stand there. Now, about 30 years ago, man, you could walk in there and play and do whatever you wanted to, but they don't let people walk in there anymore, unless you're a druid. Druids have some sort of religious card or something to prove that they're druids, and they could go in there and perform rites and rituals and so forth if they want to. There it is on the midsummer solstice with the rising of the sun. Here are our druid friends practicing their religion in Stonehenge, celebrating the rising of the sun on the summer solstice. And then there they are again, probably dropping acid or something along those lines as they celebrate the, that's racist. Maybe they're not, but probably they are. There's some more. I don't know about you, but if I happened upon this by accident, I would be terrified. See a thing like that. There they are. I found lots of cool druid pictures, so that's why we're seeing these hippie druids doing their summer solstice rituals, which is something they still do in Sweden, too. They still have the summer solstice. This is from the movie Midsummer. If you haven't seen it, it's creepy. There's a view from above, and you can see all the rings that were around it. Originally, this was a wooden structure where they did the same stuff, and then eventually it changed into a stone structure. The stones here predate the pyramids. So these were around before the pyramids were around. And they came from a quarry about 27 miles away. They were able to geologically match the stones. So what does that tell you? It tells you that it was very important for them to have these stones, bluestone it was called, and they imported it from this quarry 27 miles away using the log method, where you have rows of logs and you put the stuff and you push it and you take the log off the back and you put it on the front, you push it and take the log off the back and you put it on, and you push it for 27 miles. So that takes a lot of religious fervor and dedication to make that happen. So that tells you how important this site was. And there's the quarry where the rocks came from. Kind of crazy. It's a long way to move rocks. And then they would set them up. They figured out block and tackle methods to how they would set the rocks up and assemble them. And then there's another view. All of these little white spots you see, those are all little caverns that held cremated human remains, the humans which were sacrificed and hacked apart on this altar stone in the center. Long has this been a site of mystical wonder. This is a watercolor painting by John Constable of Stonehenge from 1835, which is kind of a little nod to the magical, mystical nature of this place. There's a layout. In case you were curious, here's some of the cremated human remains that were recovered, little hacked up pieces of bone. Sometimes they were put into little leather bags and then they buried the bags. That's what it might have looked like back in the day when all of the stones were intact, all set up. And then there's all our druid friends doing whatever they drew in the background. And then there's another hypothetical. It could have perhaps had some additional wooden walkways and stairways around it to supplement its. So, and by evidence, I mean post holes that have survived with wood fragments in the bottom that were there before. So, anything else?
So this video is going to be uploaded today?
I hope so.
Okay.
I'm going to my office right now to upload it. So,
And then are the slides available or just
this idea. The idea of stone, though, has a deep psychological impact, and that's something I want you to remember as we look at other stone work. Stone is old, and it's permanent, It allows for a huge scale, so you feel very small when you stand in front of this gigantic, magical sort of stone structure. So there's a psychological reason for using stone. It's to let you know that there's something bigger than you, something more important than you, something that was here before you were here and that's going to be here long after you're gone. So stone has its place in the universe. And then there it is, my nice little transition into the universe underneath the cosmos there. All right, there you go. All done. Any questions? Yes.
How did they know that Stonehenge was wood before?
I believe they have found evidence